Honorable Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh has been trained as a physician. He is known for his work on diabetes and endocrinology. He has been a professor, a consultant, clinical practitioner, author of books, and newspaper columnist. I now request the Honorable Minister to address the gathering. Dr. Jitendra Singh, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, who also happens to be one of India's leading biotechnologists in his own right, Dr. Rajesh S. Gokhale, Dr. Paul, Dr. Alka, Dr. Devashish, the distinguished members of the Alliance group. At the outset, I have to thank you for having made me a part of this event, though it's a sheer coincidence, if not an accident, that I've been designated as a guest of honor, because most of the conference all my life I've either been a faculty member or a keynote address speaker, and that takes time to get out of your mind. But nevertheless, I look forward to this as a learning experience, and I'm sure I'll go back wiser than before, having picked up some pearls of wisdom from all the distinguished faculty that we have over here. While Rajesh was speaking, I was very keenly listening to him. I think and as Paul was saying, that it was happening after 3 years that you are physically meeting. I think you were destined to meet on a day when just less than 24 hours away, we have a very important launching happening from nearby Sriharikota in the form of Chandrayaan-3. So you are in that last 24-hour quarter of a history making by India. And I think it was also destined for you to be a part of it, because it is indeed the Department of Biotechnology, which is less talked about, and I think if I don't talk, who else would, who gave India a place of pride through the COVID vaccine success story. And that too at a time when the whole world was looking at India as a hotspot, and they thought if India faces an outbreak of COVID, then of course they would be meeting the doom, but they'll destroy the rest of the world also. But what we saw later happening is that it was his department, the Department of Rajesh Gokhale, which successfully conducted the trials of the COVID vaccine and gifted it to the rest of the world. Whereas smaller countries with just about 500,000 population or 5 million population were unable to face the catastrophe. So you have actually made India part of that trajectory, which is seeing its next destination tomorrow. And I would rather say that this Chandrayaan event is going to reiterate what COVID vaccine did. It is going to herald India's quantum jump in the global arena and also reiterate India's indigenous capabilities and thereby firmly establish India as an important global player to reckon with. And as was being mentioned by Rajesh, he was referring to the times when we didn't have the kind of resources that possibly the scientific fraternity would have wished to have. But I think it's been a long journey, it's been a miraculous journey. Also an amazing journey from where we started, where we are. And today we are almost at an equal pedestal. There was never a dearth of human resource. We have scientific workers like Rajesh Gokhale in this generation. We had some of them in the earlier generation also. Also in the generation of Sarabhai, who carried the launcher on the carriage of his bicycle. But the resources were primitive. And I think that's been a huge change, particularly in the last 8-9 years, and the credit goes to the present Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has given science and scientific workers a kind of esteem which we had always yearned for. And only during my flight to this place, I was going through a statement made in the parliament by the then science minister in 1971. Because I keep doing all these crazy things, try looking for things which others haven't, and then try to. Because being a researcher all my life, you are stuck with that bug of coming out with something new every morning. So the then science minister, Mr. C. Subramaniam, in response to a question in the parliament, says that I admit that we don't have the kind of infrastructure that is there available in several other developed countries, and therefore many of our science experts, science scholars, and science researchers prefer to go out. But then he makes a very modest appeal, rather I would not say apologetic appeal, but he says that they should follow the example of some of those who may not be making big fortunes, but they have still decided to stay back in India and serve the motherland. Today, as science minister, I have the confidence not to say that. I have, on the other hand, confidence to say that we have everything. And those who wish to come back to India if they've gone out, or even other friends like Paul and his colleagues, we have much to offer over here in terms of both the research resource as well as the financial resource. So I think that is a huge change that has happened over the last half a century. From the position where at one time the government itself admitted that we are short of such. And Rajesh has beautifully traced that history. We also, we are also now in a position where we are able to drop cues for the rest of the world for some of the most so-called fashionable areas of scientific research. Like, for example, the climate change, the clean energy. Till a few years back, it was thought that they were not the kind of areas meant for the third world. And I mean, we were all the time beset with our problems of drought and floods and rainfalls. But today we are taking a lead, and it was the Indian Prime Minister in COP26 held out a pledge that we would be net zero by 2070. So I think now with the global world coming in, the constraints have come down, the digital modes have become more handy. It's true when he was saying, and I vividly recall when we did our thesis, our guide would ask us to refer so-and-so book. And when we would ask him where to find it from, he would say at the British Council Library. So if you went to the British Council Library in Madras, they would say, no, it is the British Council Library in the Calcutta Consulate. So you had to actually deprive yourself of that. Now you have everything at the click of your mouse. So this globalization, the digital tools have actually helped our alliance better. So these are supplementations of the alliance, which is 15 years of age now. And added to that, as was being mentioned, I'm not so good at talking about Shastras as he did, but certainly that makes me understand that we have an exclusive domain as well that is called traditional knowledge. And I'm proud to say that we have now tried to institutionalize that. Not only have we set up a traditional knowledge library as a separate exclusive cell in the CSIR, we have also now digitalized it, and now it is through a cabinet order, and now it is known as Traditional Digital Library, TKDL, or Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. And this is something which the India Alliance partners could benefit from. How to integrate. And when we talk of integrate, the synergy has to be wider. I'm glad COVID taught us that, though it taught us by default. Many of us, even in my area of work, held quite some contempt about several oriental methods of medicine, whether that be Ayurveda or homeopathy or naturopathy. And many of us were quite cynic about it. But when COVID struck, and COVID struck with a deadly manner, you find frantic calls coming from some of the European friends. Where is that booster in homeopathy which we can try? So when death faces you, you run out for all kind of options. And COVID, I think every adversity accompanied with a virtue, that was the virtue. It enabled us and also motivated us to integrate the good options available in different systems, and we did it successfully. We came out with the vaccine on one hand, we also found what were the best yoga asanas, we also found out what are the natural booster agents available, through herbs, through other natural sources, organic sources. And that integration in a wider form among the contemporary options and also extending to the traditional options is available there with India. The other part that was being mentioned was the data. Of course, the joint data. But I think what is equally of concern is that where is the data? I think we still need to have much more data than we have. And particularly in this part of the world. Much of our data is sometimes, of course, integrated, but not totally synchronous with the kind of populations that we are dealing with. And even in a country like India, you need to have multiple, parameters and multiple yardsticks. Even your disease spectrums are different. Until a few years ago, for example, my area of work, the diabetes, was known to be a disease of South India. That's why all these centers came up in Madras. Till now, the globalization has happened, it's become a pan-epidemic. That's a separate story. Up there were diseases of the high altitudes. So, the data which we have is not always very much indigenous, so we need to concentrate. And then secondly, because I have been, into this for the last 3 decades or so, once you are even able to create a data bank, then the analysis of the data is equally important. The statistical interpretation. That too is not happening always to the optimum extent. The other day I came across somebody from the area of this nutrition and child health. So since I'm most of the time passionately, my mind keeps working. So I told them with some kind of concern, I said, your data is not always very much appropriate to the kind of infant population you deal with. That's what I feel. Maybe I may be wrong. So the lady whom I was talking to, she said, no, the point is that we have the data, but we don't have the statisticians. So that is something which is not talked about, even in my education. It's not easy to have an equally clinically applicable, applied interpretation of the data. So both the things, data first and then the interpretation. To my mind, I think the old times, because I am also growing ancient now, though not old, I don't call myself old. In the British pattern of education, which carried on for quite a few years, even after independence, we actually had statistics as a subject even in college, in undergraduation. We don't have now. In fact, Rajesh you would be surprised when I tell you, I had statistics as a subject in my class 12. Because we were still following the same pattern in that university. Now it's given up. Now even in the post-graduation or the PhD, statistics is opted by someone who gets nothing else. But the value of this, you would realize that even Dr. Sama Prasad Mukherjee, the first Science Minister of India and the first Vice President of CSIR, was a PhD in statistics, not in political science, as you would apparently make out. So I think these are some of so I am glad, why I am saying so, I was going through this note, I am glad that the India Alliance, which is 15 years old, in first phase, focused on some of the basic biomedical research areas, and then gradually came over to the newer areas to create an ecosystem. And I'm sure when we look at these basic areas, we would also talk of having resources, which of course essentially would be gathering of data. And 589 research sites I see in this note spread across 48 cities is, I think, quite a commendable thing. And you have a huge range of countries, including USA, UK, Australia, France. And what was fascinating me when I was sitting in this table and seeing is the developing Indian physician scientists. So I think that is something to do which I have been talking about in the last few minutes. Indian remedies for Indian diseases. Indian treatment for Indian problems. Indian data for Indian concerns. Indian solutions for Indian problems. At least in science it holds. However much global we get, But we can't change our phenotype, we can't change our genotype, we can't change our parents, we can't change our ancestors. The day we get a choice to change our parents, or at least choose our parents, I think that would be done away with. So, developing Indian physician scientists, I think one fascinating area which should generate certain amount of curiosity, because we have a set of problems. Of course, till a few years ago, we were beset with a lot of tropical issues like cholera, diarrhea, gastroenteritis. And I remember even at the AIIMS in Delhi, we used to get regularly these undergraduate boys and girls from UK to do a part of their internship in our tropical wards of tuberculosis, malaria, because they didn't have much of that resource patient over there. So I think that is something which is fascinating. And now that we are entering, thanks again to the COVID, into a era of preventive health care, and particularly from the point of view of India, which has more than 70% population of below 40. So I think that becomes all the more important, because you can't allow your population, your huge youth energy, to be, to be allowed to be squandered at the, or not, if not fully go waste, to partially get pilfered by some of those lifestyle diseases which have started happening at a relatively younger age, whether it's diabetes mellitus or the heart attacks or something like that. Because if you are beset with one of those problems in the prime of your age and career, it's not only incapacitating the individual as such, it's actually telling upon the energy which could have otherwise been utilized for the nation building. So you are the nation's source and nation's energy, and we can hardly. And yes, I was also quite impressed to see this point of grant holders' work on examining health inequalities in some of the reserves in the Western Arunachal and Northeast India. I think that's another fascinating. That goes with what I was saying in the beginning. We have such a huge amount of diversity. We are diverse not only in our eating habits and clothing habits, we are also diverse in our diseases. We are diverse in falling ill. With what we fall is diverse. We are also diverse in treating ourselves. Some of us would, in some of the remote areas, you will have clans. If the patient survives, they say, okay, it was mother's blessing. If he doesn't survive, they would take recluse to Rajesh's theory, Pichle Janam ka karam tha. So even in matters of treating ourselves, we are diverse. Even in our death, we are diverse, how we treat our dead ones. So such a huge amount of diversity. I'm glad that somebody has thought of taking up this project. And I must compliment the perseverance and the effort and the consistent work which must have gone beyond this, because I know how difficult it is at the level of the Alliance Secretariat and the Alliance body, and they are now based in Hyderabad and been performing a kind of a task which is, I think, unique in its own way. I'm sure in the times to come we'll be able to propagate it more, because when that too is diverse, so when we have to bring it to public, to make them understand, to make them aware, we have to learn to speak in their language. And what is their language? Their language is by the way of that small instrument which we carry in our pockets, the mobile, or because even the newspaper is read on the mobile, the television is seen on mobile. So we have to talk to them through that digital language. You can create small logarithms, small jingles, which could highlight some of these problems. Because I'm sure there are people ready to learn, also willing to learn, but the kind of material that they are offered is not enough for them to devour. I once again congratulate you and thank you for having made me part of this. Thank you very much.